Okay, good morning, everybody. We thank and praise God for this opportunity to be here on today. We want to give honor and respect to Pastor Emeritus Dr. Felker, as well as Sister Shirley Felker, as well as to the chair of our trustee ministry, Sister Gloria Williams, and Brother Eugene. We hope things are going well for you all on today, as well as to our co-chairman of Deacons, Deacon Warren Irby, and we hope that things are going well for you today, and to each of you that are sharing with us in person, as well as online. Pastors that are sharing with us, as well as the family and friends of Mount Carmel. We are back with you again. We apologize for not being able to be with you on last session, but we want to make that catch up as we continue our study of Ecclesiastes, questioning our faith in a confusing world. This will be session 11, and when we take a look at the title, and there are a lot of things that had been happening and are beginning to happen since we got into this study. And there's been such an interesting group of events that are happening in our world, as well as our nation, and our state, and even in our city. And then in your cities, wherever your cities are that are watching us over the past months. These types of challenges have been challenges to our faith, our biblical knowledge, our patience, and our humanitarianism. There's been a lot of those challenges going on. Sometimes we can watch television rather, or our monitors, and we see stuff that's being discussed that we had some discussions of when we were going to Sunday school. We hear terms like Israel, and we hear terms like Palestine, and we hear all of these different terms, and then we hear some new terms like Hamas. Okay, we may not be as familiar with those. Those might have not have been a term that was mentioned when you were in your Bible studies. But nevertheless, there are a number of those kinds of things that are going on. And all of these things have caused us to see our confusing world, while at the same time calling question to our faith. Where are we as it relates to that? How far should we go with our humanitarianism? How much is enough? Are we covering everyone with our humanitarianism? Are we newly discovering being humanitarians now that we have some new people coming into our country? Or should we have been being humanitarians all the time with the folk that were in need all the time that were around us? There are a number of things that we have to look at. Terms like Israel, Hamas, Palestinians, Ukraine, the Russians, mass shootings, hate crimes, political turmoil, injustice for many, while there has been justice for only a few. We sit up and we watch the television and we see 45 get walked all the way to the door of justice, only to walk away from it with a smirk and a smile. And it makes you wonder sometimes. And then we also see homelessness being confronted with the need at the same time to provide homes for others. Okay? There has been even the challenge to discontinue the international welcoming status of the city of Chicago. Now, that's a status that was initiated by the first black mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington. But yet and still, there are many African Americans in the city of Chicago calling for an end to the international welcoming status. So there's a lot of stuff that are going on, that we have to deal with. When we think about the things that question our faith in a confusing world. Now, there's a popular song from the 1960s that was not meant to be theological, but has a lot of theology in it. The song also speaks well to our topical discussion from the book of Ecclesiastes, questioning our faith in a confusing world. The song is by the Temptations, and it's entitled Ball of Confusion. And some of the words go like this: people moving out, people moving in. Why? Because of the color of their skin. Run, 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 but you sure can't hide. It seems that there are other words that says, well, the only person talking about love thy brother is the preacher. And it seems nobody's interested in learning but the teacher. The song will go on to say, segregation, determination, demonstration, integration, aggravation, humiliation, obligation to my nation. And again, it would talk about a ball of confusion. But then it would also go on to say, eve of destruction, tax deduction, city inspectors, bill collectors, modern clothes in demand, population out of hand, suicide, too many bills, hippies moving to the hills. People all over the world are shouting, "In the war." And you all that know the song know that they say, and the band played on, right? Okay? A lot of stuff going on. In the middle of all this and more, brothers and sisters, we have opportunity to look in on the world's wisest man, Solomon, and see how he vacillated between what's going on, had to throw a little Marvin Gaye in there, okay, and our faith in God. So see, so far we have seen that this earthly wisdom means nothing when engaged in the complexities that we face in our world. And we have no better example than that of Solomon. Here Solomon is the wisest man on the planet that we've come to know, but yet and still we see him wrestling with some of these issues that are going on in his time. And these are some of the same issues that are going on in our time. And it enables us to come to understand, brothers and sisters, that human rationale alone cannot enable us to stand on our faith. We need a real relationship with God. That becomes important for us to understand. Okay? Now, in our study and discussion of Solomon so far, we have seen that after a brief flirtation with hope, Solomon once again turned to despair at the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, when he considered the problem of injustice. Now, listen again, he got into the end of chapter 3, but listen to the beginning of chapter 4 again, especially the A clause of chapter 4, where Solomon says these words: "I looked again at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun." You see, when Solomon looks at that, he says he's looking at all the stuff that's going on. Just as the Temptations were looking at and inspired, the writers of the song were inspired to look at all the stuff that was going on. Well, Solomon was looking at all this stuff that was going on, particularly the oppression that was going on, excuse me. And then Solomon makes an interesting statement in the A clause of verse 2 of chapter 4, where he says these words: "So I congratulated the dead who are already dead." In other words, he said, man, listen, this thing is so bad. If you ain't here, it's good. And if you don't come, that's good too. You know, now that's how we tend to, that's how people and society tends to look at things with such a pessimistic look and a pessimistic outlook, when it just looks like there's no solution to the situations and circumstances that we are in. Nor does it look like there's no way we can work our way into it or work our way out of it. And especially when we don't think about having a relationship or a trust or a guidance by God. This becomes important for us to understand. You see, the thoughts of both oppressors and their victims finding no justice, even in eternity, was so bitter to Solomon that he thought that the dead were fortunate. You know, when you think about, some people say, well, you know, at the end of this thing, when you're dead, you're done. There's nothing else after this. And think about it. If there's nothing else after this, if you don't get no recourse to what's going on in your life, you die oppressed, okay? But then you also have no vindication. So you can die without any vindication. And so he's looking at that, remember now, AKA under the sun, AKA without a relationship with God, okay? Without even looking at the fact that there is something after this life, okay? And so it becomes important for us to understand that situation. Now, Solomon feels at this point that there's no punishment for the evil oppressor and there's no resolve for the oppressed. So he says, man, you might well not even come up in here because it's bad, okay? Now, so, having said that, I want you to think about this. And also, you can feel free to talk about it. You can chime in if you want. Now, it is clear that Solomon is discouraged by the oppression of this world and what seems to him to be the absence of justice for the oppressed. Now, as Christians, I want you to think about this. What should our response be to oppression in this world? I mean, you know, should we be glad that it's not in our backyard? Should we say, if it don't bother me, ain't gonna bother it? Should we just feel that, you know, like some people do, they say, well, you know, I get so tired of looking at how bad things are on the news, I turn the news off, and, you know, out of sight, maybe out of mind. Okay, how do you think we should feel about that? Think about that. resonate on that. Feel free to chime in. Those of you here, you feel free to chime in if you want. But think about it. How do you think we should feel about the oppression that we see in this world? You know? Any comments? Yes, sir?
I think we should feel pretty sad about it, because in actuality, in some situations, what are the alternatives? What can we do?
Okay. So it can make you sad because it almost looks like there's no recourse. There's no solution to this. It seems, oh, here it comes, hopeless. Okay. You know, some of this stuff can look pretty bad, and so it can make you feel sad. But think about this. And you all at home that may have chimed in, feel free to type into the text box as well. But have you ever thought about, ask yourself the question, well, what can I do? Okay? And I don't mean to solve all of the world's problems, but to solve or begin to do something about the ones that are right in front of you. Okay? What can I do? And you know, and sometimes we feel that the situations are so overwhelming, we say, well, man, I can't make a difference. But we all can make a difference, one event, one person, one oppression at a time, engaging one at a time. You know, it becomes important for us to understand that. They used to say something before there were emails, and people were calling politicians or writing politicians, they used to say, you know, for every one letter that a politician would receive about an issue, there are 50 people that feel the same way. Okay, and so you know you start looking at that, and then you start transposing those numbers as it relates to phone calls and emails. And you know, and I think about it like at homegoing services when it comes time to give remarks. You know, sometimes you say we're going to have remarks done by family or friends, and everybody's just sitting there. And then finally, one person gets up, and when that one person gets up, all of a sudden everybody in the room starts wanting to get up. Because everybody starts saying, you know what, I could have said something. You know what, I could say something. And you know, and that's the way it is as it relates to us looking at the oppression that is in our society, the situations and circumstances that are in society. We are a village, and we all have an opportunity to just do our part. You're not going to change the whole city. You're not going to change the whole state. You might not even change your whole entire community, but you may be able to affect that one person that is on your one block in front of your one house or apartment. It becomes important for us to take a look at that. Okay? I'm going to give you that. Now, having said that, let's listen again to verses 7 and 8. This is 2 sessions ago of Ecclesiastes chapter 4. I'll read it for you. Then I looked again at futility under the sun. There was a man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother. Yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, and for whom do I labor and deprive myself of pleasure? This too is futility, and it is an unhappy task. I've heard the term, the ideal of, and for whom do I labor and deprive myself of pleasure before, but I've never heard it put in those terms other than in the Bible. I've heard people talking about living to work versus working to just live to go to work. And that's all they do. You know, they work, they come home, get cleaned up, watch a little TV or whatever, go to bed, and then get up to go back to work. Okay, and that's all they do is live to work. And some of those individuals, statistics have shown that a lot of those individuals, when they retire, they die soon. You know, it's almost like they no longer have a purpose. Okay, and they don't even realize it sometimes. And Solomon is really talking about that because there are workaholics, there are people who deprive themselves of living with work. But then you put on top of that, you're doing all this work and you don't have no son, no daughter to leave it to. You don't have no spouse to leave it to. And you start saying, well, man, this thing is like vanity, or as some other versions say, it's like chasing after the wind, or striving after the wind, or it's futile, or it's useless. You know, so these are the kind of things that we face when we look at the stuff that's happening in this confusing world. It can make us look at what's worth it, or question our faith in that all we do. Okay? Now, then, in verse 8, see the C clause of verse 8, I want you to listen to Solomon as he begins to describe what I call the workaholic loner. This is the C clause of verse 8. He says, and he never asked, and for whom do I labor and deprive myself of pleasure? This too is futility, and it is an unhappy task. Now, it becomes important for us to understand that this person, whether they are male or female, never questions why they are working themselves so hard. And this is vanity. That's like chasing the wind. You just doing something and you don't even realize there's no purpose to you doing it. You got good money, you got possessions, and you got all this stuff, but you still feel empty. You feel worthless. You know, it becomes important for us to understand. And there are people, brothers and sisters, today that are in that cycle. Okay? They're just in that cycle. So now, having said that, there are some things I want you to reflect on. Okay? First of all, why do we do the things we do? Think about it. If we aren't satisfied today, what makes us believe we will be satisfied tomorrow? You know, there are some people who live out their lives not feeling that they're going to accomplish anything, or not feeling that they have accomplished anything. And, you know, society has tried to help those individuals. Many times we call them unsung heroes because they're doing a lot of stuff. They don't get any, if they don't get any recognition, they're doing it because they feel they should do it. But it becomes important, excuse me, for us to understand that they begin to feel that it's useless if they're just doing it and no one's recognizing it, what they're doing. It becomes important for us to understand that. And so we should think about that. And then you should think about this. Why do you do the things that you do? You know, and I want to tell you something, full disclosure. And I share this a lot. I say, you know, sometimes I take a look at the stuff that I do in the community and things of that sort. And not only that, but Brother Mason, I think about the folk that don't do it. Okay? And you know, you sit back and you say, well, man, why am I doing this? Okay, I could be sitting home just like them. I could be relaxing. I could be doing, there's 100 things that I could be doing just as well rather than going over here and doing this, marching over here doing this, protesting doing this, having a meeting about this, standing against this, bringing people to grips about a situation relative to that. And so sometimes it's important to ask yourself, why do you do the things that you do? Because if you don't know the answer to that, you know, you won't get anything out of doing what you do. Okay, so it becomes important for us to understand that. And then the real soul-searching question is, well, first of all, the soul-searching reality is, whatever you do, it ought to be satisfying to you. Okay? Because listen, if it's not satisfying to you today, what makes you think it's going to be satisfying to you tomorrow? Okay? You ought to concentrate on things. We used to have a term for that. We used to call them dead-end jobs. You know, and people are going to a job, and they really don't even want to be there. And the question is, why are you there? Okay? If you don't want to be there, maybe you should consider finding another job or creating a job, becoming an entrepreneur or doing something else. It becomes important for us to understand those are the kinds of things that are important. And sometimes, excuse me, even though you may have said, yes, I'll do a thing, and your intent may be to do it for a while, but then after a while, you start saying, well, you know, I really don't want to do this. You know, I think it becomes important to let somebody know, you know what, maybe I need to take another look at this. Maybe I need to step back from this. Maybe I need to go into a different direction. Because if you don't, I'm here to tell you, if you're not satisfied today, what makes you think you're going to be satisfied tomorrow? Okay?
I think that's why some people change jobs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not happy where they are. The pay could be great, but they're not happy where they're. They hate going every day. And now, most people are working from home. They hate to get up and watch the computers and stuff because they're tired of doing the same thing. So then they start changing jobs because they feel useless in whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Or not satisfied.
Or not satisfied.
Now, money, as we all know, money is a great motivator. And, you know, and the desire, the love of money is a tremendous motivator. And so sometimes we'll find ourselves going from one job to another because of the financial motivation. But then it becomes the question of, even though the finances are good, is this what I really want to do? Is this what I want to continue to do? And that's a question that you should really ask yourself and be willing to challenge yourself on that and be willing to move into something that might even pay less, but it becomes more satisfying. Because I just think there's nothing worse than working in a job that you don't want to be in. Okay, it becomes important for us to understand that. Those are good comments from you all. Now, here's a reality that I want you to reflect on, and that is nothing here on earth will ever fully satisfy us. We must stop following the ways of the world and instead walk in the ways of the Word. Okay? Stop following the ways of the world and start walking in the ways of the Word. Okay, that becomes important for us to understand as we live our lives today, because, you know, society has a way of luring us into wanting to do stuff so that we can just tell folk that we're doing it. And there's really no accomplishment to it, okay, or satisfaction. Okay? Now, let's look at the strength of friendship and cooperation in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. Now, this is what is also called a pivot, because it becomes interesting. Up to this point, man, we've been talking about issues of stress, work, no satisfaction, oppression, all of these things. And now Solomon begins to take what is called a pivot. And it begins to go from talking about all of that stuff to now talking about the strength of friendship and cooperation. We're not talking about working by yourself now. We're not talking about not having anything to leave anybody to now. We're not talking about being oppressed and not receiving any justice. Okay, now we're getting ready to talk about some friendship and cooperation in the next few verses here. Let's listen to verses 9 through 12. And this is New American Standard Bible. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. Now, interesting, we read a passage like that, you know, it becomes important for us to understand a lot of stuff that's happening in a passage like that. And, you know, I heard a lot of that. You know, I used to hear it, some old deacons used to pray when I was a kid, and I would listen to them, and sometimes one of them would say in their prayers, Lord, bind us so close together that one cannot fall for leaning against the other. And, you know, and I'd hear that as a kid coming up, and I said, well, that's really close when you can't fall. And then I started thinking about when I was a child myself, in the wintertime, just like this. And back in the day when it was a different world, when they made you go outside, no matter how cold it was for recess, okay? And sometimes we would get ready to come inside, and they were trying to get us to line up. And we would get together, and we start pushing against each other. And everybody would start piling up. And somebody would start saying, pile up, keep me warm, pile up, keep me warm. And we start pushing against each other. And even if you lost your footing, you couldn't fall. Because people were so close together, you know, sometimes you didn't even have to hold yourself up because everybody was pushed against each other. And I think about those kind of ideas when you talk about friendship and companionship, how close we get together that one cannot fall for leaning against the other. But now, having said that, we come to understand, as you all will know, that friendships can be complicated. Okay? We all know how hard friendships are when we were young. Okay? Why are friendships hard when we're young? Let's take a look at it, because there's some mean folk out there. There's some cliques out there. There's some teasing. I'm talking about young people. I ain't talking about old people. I ain't got to us yet, okay? But there are mean people out there. There are cliques out there. There are people who tease. There are people who bully. There are people who gossip. A lot of this stuff we experienced when we were in school, okay? But then, as we grow up, hopefully by this point we have learned a few things about how to be a good friend and how to avoid toxic people. You know, as we grew up, we started learning, you know, who really with you and who's really not with you. Or as we used to say, who has your back and who doesn't have your back. Okay, you kind of learn those things. And it becomes important for us to know that God has designed us to live in relationship with Him and with others. Okay? See, not only should our relationship, we just can't have a sterile relationship with God alone. we still have to have a relationship with each other. Okay? And so it becomes important for us to understand. And the cross shows us that not only does the cross have a vertical axis on it that shows that we are connected with God, but it has a horizontal axis on it to show that we're connected with one another laterally. Okay, and it becomes important for us to understand that God has designed us to not only live in a relationship with Him, but He's designed us to live in a relationship with others. You know, we were never meant to live alone, but to share our lives with others. That's why worshiping together is so important. The Bible speaks of us to forsake not the assembling of ourselves together, because sometimes it may be you that strengthens someone else. It's not necessarily all the time that you're going to get strength from someone. You know, sometimes someone is getting strength from you, but they can't get that from you if you're not a part of that to help them to get that. It becomes important for us to understand that. Now, this is especially true of Christians because we need the close fellowship and support of other believers. The Bible tells us, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. So those are things that are important for us to understand. So now, as we begin to wrap up today, a couple things I want to share with you in closing. And that's just this time of reflection for us. Okay? Think about this. Who are some of the friends that God has placed in your life that you support, love, and protect? And who does this for you? Okay? Not only who are you a friend to, but who's a friend to you? Okay? Think about that. Then consider how you can be a better friend to the people God has placed into your life. Don't take for granted your friendship. How can you be a better friend? These are things to consider as we face the issues that cause us to question our faith in a confusing world. And I just want you to know, that's it. That's all. We hope there's been a blessing and a help to you on today. It's good to be back with you. It's good to see you all sharing with us on today. Again, we want you to put into the text box those that you want us to pray for, and we're praying as well as the answered prayers. We know there are a number of us that are going through. There are a number of us that have experienced various things, and we want to not only pray for them, but we want to also celebrate the reality and the answered prayers that God has given us as well. There are no details at this time on the passing of Sister Dampier's daughter that we just received word that she did pass on yesterday early evening. And I talked with Sister Dampier this morning, and they still have to do some things. It's going to take some time before they begin to, that are related with the hospital, that they're going to do. It takes about 48 to 72 hours for some things that they're going to need to do before they begin to make any plans. We want to pray for the Dampier family, and we want to pray for all of our members that are having procedures, that have come through procedures, and that God is blessing and strengthening as well, and prepare ourselves for what we are up and coming to on this coming week. And so with that being said, we're going to have our closing prayer at this time. Gracious God, we thank you for allowing us this opportunity to come together. We ask you to bless those who are in need of your strength and your guidance, continued need of your strength and guidance. And then, Master, we thank you for those that you have blessed to come through their situations and circumstances, those that you have brought back to us, those that you have strengthened through their own circumstances of bereavement and things that they have had to experience in their lives, those situations and circumstances of medical procedures and surgeries. We thank you for bringing them through. We ask you to continue to bring them through as they begin their process of healing and restoration. Continue to keep us now. Dismiss us from this place, but never from your presence. This is Jesus' name we pray and give thanks. Amen. Okay, well, thank you all for sharing with us on today. And until next time, take care and God bless.